Welcome to Warriors Corner. Our next presentation will be Army Digital Transformation Strategy with presenters Dr. Raj Iyer, Dr. David Markowitz, Mr. Paul Puckett, Major General Matthew Easley, and Lieutenant General John Morrison.
Morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? All right, day 3 of the conference. I hope you're still excited as I am. So I'm Raj Iyer. I'm the new CIO. I think I can still say that. I'm 10 months into the job. The first CIO of the U.S. Army in the Secretariat. I oversee the digital enterprise for Secretary Warmuth. And we're going to talk to you about Army's digital transformation strategy to achieve Waypoint 2028. So on the panel today, I have several esteemed colleagues. Dr. Dave Markowitz is our Chief Data Officer in the Office of the CIO. Mr. Paul Puckett runs the Enterprise Cloud Management Agency in the Office of the CIO. Major General Matt Easley is the Chief Cybersecurity Officer in the Office of the CIO. Dr. Doug Matty runs the Army's Artificial Intelligence Integration Center in Futures Command. And then my best friend, General Morrison, is the Army G6. So we'll get started. But before we do that, just a show of hands. I mean, the last couple of days, how many of you have heard the word digital more than once in a briefing? Show of hands. Almost everybody, right? Do you know what digital means? What is digital? Does that just become a buzzword, right? Is that the next bumper sticker that we want to put on our cars? And I don't think so, right? So I'm going to talk to you about what the Army is doing with digital, why this is so critical to us, and how we're going after commercial best practices. So digital is all about, a change in mindset, right? So all these years, the Army's done really well talking about IT. We've had great technologies that we've inserted into the fight over the last 20 years. That's really served us well. But the pivot that the Army is now making, and you heard, our secretary say this, on Monday morning, is we're moving from the industrial age to the digital age. The chiefs calls it the information age. And what this means is now us pivoting towards data for decision making, right? We'll always have platforms, we'll always have IT systems, we'll always have the networks. But what's new now, what's different now is our pivot to using data as our strategic asset for decision making. And that is the big mindset change that we all need to overcome and will need to adopt as we adopt digital transformation. So next slide. So the Army's digital enterprise is huge. So when I took on the job, a little under a year ago, I didn't realize how huge this was, right? And I can tell you, people always said, the former secretary said, Raj, we want you to run Army IT like a business. And I told him, sir, with these numbers, there is no business that's as large as Army IT. There is no Fortune 100 company that comes even close to the scale and complexity of our digital enterprise. And so we need to acknowledge that, but let's not admire that problem, right? It is vast. We know it's huge. We know we have challenges, but let's stop admiring the problem. And when you look at some of the numbers here, and I won't read through all of them, right? So I oversee a $15 billion annual budget for the enterprise. So it's not like we don't have money. Anybody says we don't have money to do digital in the Army is mistaken. We do. It's all about how we balance our priorities, how we make sure that we are realigning our resources where it really belongs. How do you achieve the right balance between supporting current readiness and future modernization? So you're going to hear about that today. What you're also going to hear about are some of the challenges and the opportunities we have with our digital workforce of the future. 72,000 employees around the world. They're doing phenomenal work today. But where I think we still have work to do is to truly empower them to innovate, to truly give them the data that we're generating across the enterprise, to democratize that data so they can be successful and for them to be able to go build the apps like what the software factory is doing, for them to be able to build their own COPS and dashboards and analytics, anything that they need on their own and empowering them to do it. And that's the job of the CIO. So my job is to become that easy button for the rest of the Army to innovate so that they can focus on their the functional work, the operational work, and prototyping and experimentation, and not have to worry about how the technology is going to support them, right? Next slide. So why digital transformation for the Army? Because again, like I said, if there's one takeaway from the last 2 days of the conference, it's all about changing culture, right? That's what digital transformation is. Think about what has happened to us in the consumer world. Over the last 10 years, we've gone from saying, hey, I want to buy more laptops and computers and mobile devices, to saying how we're going to leverage the data for decision making just day to day at home, right? We have Alexas and Google Assistants now telling us what to do and scheduling appointments for us, and we have autonomous driving, with our Teslas. The world's changed on the consumer world. And the Army recognized that through the Army's modernization strategy that came out 3 years ago. And it explicitly called out digital transformation as one of those means for achieving Army modernization. It is how we're going to get to the multi-domain operations force or ready force by Waypoint 2028 and Aimpoint 2035, right? It's explicitly called out. And the reason for that is all of these that you see here, right? We want to close the kill chain. We want to make this as effective as it can be, as short as it can be, with the vast amounts of data that we're collecting. Every one of our weapon system platforms that we're building, the 31+4 that you've been hearing for the last 2 days, the 6 cross-functional teams, are all generating vast volumes of data, tremendous volumes of data. Every sensor is generating data. So how do we make sure we can protect that data? How do we make sure it's available to decision makers at echelon, right? How do we make sure that we're able to move that data across our networks in DDIL environments, right? We know that we're going to be in congested, denied, degraded, intermittent, environments. How do we do that? And how do we make sure that cybersecurity is built into this from the get-go? It cannot be an afterthought. That's how we've operated all these years, right? We've always built IT systems or platforms, and then we worried about how we were going to secure it. Digital transformation is all about moving cybersecurity front and center to how we're going to transform. It's about how we're going to protect the data at the edge and all the way up to the strategic network. And that is absolutely imperative. So what you'll also see is what are those key digital enablers. Those key enablers are cloud, right? Because when you look at large volumes of data, our traditional approaches to storing them on-premise or on servers is no longer really helpful or useful, right? So this is where cloud comes in. Cloud computing comes in because it gives us truly unlimited capacity to be able to store and process large volumes of data. It is absolutely critical that we look at AI and machine learning technologies, because when you look at this volume of data, our analysts, our hundreds of analysts sitting in rooms, cannot pour over this data anymore. It's just not feasible anymore, right? So it's absolutely critical that we have machine learning and AI to be able to process these large volumes of data, and then to be able to support commanders with decision making. It's about cybersecurity, right? At every piece of this, end-to-end puzzle, not just protecting systems or networks, but it's protecting data, all the way through its life cycle. And then we talked about the network. The network is absolutely fundamental to achieving multi-domain operations. You heard about our plans for the unified network yesterday. We released the Army Unified Network Plan as part of the rollout here at AUSA. We have a solid plan under the leadership of General Morrison to go execute that. And that is, again, a top priority through the network cross-functional team, for the PEOs, and for me as a CIO. Next slide. So we have some challenges, though, right? So let's acknowledge them. Right? We don't need to admire them, but let's acknowledge them. From a cloud perspective, last year was all about us in the Army establishing our accredited cloud environments in unclassified and classified environments. And there was a lot of discussion around whether the Army should wait for the JEDI contract to come through and that would be our solution. Well, we didn't wait. I guess we all know where JEDI landed up, right? So we were fortunate under the leadership of Mr. Puckett to lead this effort to establish unclassified and classified clouds. And now we're at a point where we can actually scale and operationalize that environment. Now, that doesn't mean just moving apps to the cloud. but truly leveraging the cloud as part of our unified network to be able to move, process large volumes of data all the way up down to the tactical edge and back. We know we have challenges with our network, right? And we still have, I mean, our tactical networks actually are pretty robust and have done a tremendous job all the way up to us, retrograding and new operations, the very last thing that we did out of Afghanistan, right? The network was the last thing that got pulled out when we moved out of Afghanistan. Played a tremendous role, worked awesomely well, right? But the future fight is not at the brigade combat team level, right? If there's one takeaway from the conference, this is going to be a core division level fight. And that means that we now need our networks fully integrated on the tactical side to the operational and to the strategic, right? And we need to see this. We need to have a common operating picture of this network like it's one unified network. And we need to be able to work through all of the issues around reciprocity and who owns the network and who owns the cybersecurity risks associated with who owns which part of the network and the applications that go on the network. Absolutely critical. And we have to be able to take advantage of all the innovation and the modernization that the private sector is doing on commercial transport and fiber, right? You'll be amazed at how much some of the hyperscalers and the cloud service providers have now invested in actually putting in commercial fiber all around the world in places that we thought we, the DoD and the Army, were the only ones that existed. So it is our best interest to ride on this, the investments, the billions of dollars that investment that the commercial sector has made in putting together the infrastructure and the capabilities with the right cybersecurity in place, and that's where zero trust comes in, right? So from a cybersecurity perspective, our attack surface area has now exponentially increased. In the past, we had to worry about just protecting IT systems. Now it's all of the operational technology, the OT, it's the Internet of Things, it's the SCADA and ICS devices. The lessons learned from 2021 were that we're most vulnerable with our critical infrastructure. And our weapon system platforms have not kept up with the changing dynamic threat environment, right? So that needs to be resolved. From a data perspective, I think we've done a tremendous job in establishing our Vantage Army data platform. That's now truly helped us democratize data at all echelons. We literally have thousands of users at all levels generating thousands of dashboards on a daily basis and being used by commanders all the way up to 4 stars today, right? I couldn't have said that 5 years ago. If someone said, hey, where did that data come from? It was a bunch of people doing PowerPoints. We have now changed that culture, that mindset to actually leveraging data from authoritative data sources. But we need to continue on the journey because our journey now is JADC2, right? Executive analytics is great, but if we need to support multi-domain operations, it's how we're going to use that same data and the interoperability of that data across weapon system platforms. How do we enforce that very early in the life cycle of these new 31+4 programs? How do we make sure that that interoperability for data, and APIs and microservices are not getting traded off, by PMs in the acquisition process? That's the journey we're on now. And then, most importantly, from a people perspective, right? At the end of the day, we fight with our soldiers. All of these technologies are great, digital is great, but at the end of the day, it is absolutely critical that we upskill and reskill our workforce, and that includes the military and the civilian population to make sure that they can truly be, take advantage of digital technologies and drive innovation across the Army. Our software factory that you heard about on Monday, right here at the Warriors Corner, perfect example of one of those things that we have strategically invested. My office is working hand in hand with the folks down in Austin, in terms of establishing accredited environments for them to do DevSecOps, right? It's about changing culture, so the security in DevSecOps is absolutely critical. How do we shift left? How do we make sure that it's not an afterthought and we're cutting down our ATO cycles from 6 to 9 months to 30 to 60 days? That's the journey we're on. Next slide. So the Army Digital Strategy that is going to get released here, at the end of AUSA, codifies this into a single integrated framework for us to now all pull together, right? We've done great work for the last few years. What the ADTS lets us do is to achieve unity of effort. If you don't have this, commanders are going to do what they're good at doing, execute and operating their mission. PMs are going to do what they're best at doing, which is sticking to cost, performance, and schedule and what's in the requirements for their program, right? What the ADTS does is gets the CIO and the senior leaders strategically engaged to make sure that we are overseeing the policies that we've established. And there's quite a few policies that we've already established in 21, right? To say that we are going to be cloud native with everything that we do. You heard the next generation combat vehicle CFD yesterday talk about how cloud is an integral part of the requirements process for the next generation combat vehicle. It's in the synthetic training environment, all in, right? It's in every one of our modernization programs. But we got to make sure that we are providing the right oversight and the right support and help to the acquisition community and to work with industry to make sure that all of you folks understand the strategic intent and the direction we're headed. That's what the ADTS helps us do. The ADTS also helps us prioritize in an especially resource-constrained environment how we're going to balance and trade off, all of these competing priorities, right? If we don't do that, we continue to spend money on things that we've been spending money on. That's how our PPBE process works. If you do not actively engage and disrupt it, and talk about how we need to be adaptive and get ahead of these technologies, it's just going to move on, right? And people are going to execute funds the way they've always been. And so that's what ADTS lets us do. You'll see that it's bucketed into 3 major categories. The first focuses on readiness and modernization. To us, that's one continuum, right? So for the last 20 years, we've been focused on readiness. We will always be focused on readiness. But so many of these technologies we're talking about today are real today, now, right? We don't have to wait till 2028 or 2035. So we got to achieve that continuum and the balance between readiness and modernization. But that also means that we got to take a hard look at how we're going to divest some of the legacy systems in our portfolio. This is the same discussion that the secretary had on Monday. She talked about ruthless prioritization, right? That applies to us in the digital world. We have to do the same thing in terms of looking at legacy systems. And some of our mission areas have done an awesome job with this. The business mission area has done a tremendous job in terms of establishing the path forward for the future and the modernization. We have to do this across all our mission areas to make sure we have the right balance, because if we don't, we continue to invest in old technology into the future, and we never have enough money left over to be able to modernize for the future. And that is one of the key pivots that we're making through the ADTS. The second is about reform. I talked to you about policy reform. Our policies haven't changed in 30, 40 years. I was surprised to go back and look at some of our cybersecurity policies and data policies and network policies. It is not reflective of what we need to do to achieve multi-domain operations. And that is my job as a CIO and the Secretariat, is to fix those policies. But those policies need to be worked in conjunction with our joint partners, with our coalition allied nation partners, and with industry, right? I don't want to do this in a vacuum. I want to make sure that we do this the right way. So I'm seeking and looking for your feedback in terms of, where policy is an impediment to you. Just a quick show of hands. How many people feel like there's some policy that's stopping you from doing what you really want to do? Almost everybody, right? That should not be the case today. That is sad, right? So we need to fix that. That is a top priority. But we also need to make sure we don't stop with policy. I have told my leadership team that we're going to actively engage with the community at all echelons to go hold your hands and help you with digital transformation. We're not just going to sign out policy and say, go do it, right? We're going to walk hand in hand with you and show you how to do this. That is the mindset that we're putting together in place. And finally, people and partnerships. I think, like I said, if we don't get ahead of the people talent, the race for talent, we run the risk of losing this right from the get-go. So we're building capacity, but we're building it at a small, reasonable, with reasonable expectations. I do not want to go create a dozen software factories like some of the other services did, right? We have to learn from what we're doing at the software factory in Austin, get the lessons learned, and talk about then how we're going to scale it. We also do not want to limit that just to Compo 1. How do we take advantage of the expertise that we have in Compo 2 and Compo 3? People that are actually doing this in their day-to-day jobs, right? When they work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, but then we're not able to take advantage of them in their reservist or National Guard capacity, right? How do we build that marketplace of talent across the Army, independent of what your MOS is or what Compo you work for, or whether you're a civilian or a contractor, right? How do we build that virtual ecosystem? And then finally, and again, I won't say finally because it's not the last thing, but it's always the first thing, is our future fight is a joint fight with our allied and coalition partners. It cannot be an afterthought. So I'm actively engaging. I mean, this year, I spent a lot of time going around talking to our allied nation partners to understand where we can work together. We have prioritized the mission partner environment as a top priority for FY22. We absolutely need it. We got to figure this thing out. When we talk about data and the cybersecurity challenges, if we don't share this information and this knowledge with our coalition partners, we have lost that strategic advantage, right? Our force multiplier are our coalition and mission partners. And so we got to make sure that we are completely and fully integrated with them. And that, again, is fully codified in the ADTS. Let's see if there's a next slide. Okay, so this is where I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the folks on the panel to briefly talk about each of those areas that I just touched upon, and then we'll come back at the end for some questions. I'm available after the conference anytime to talk to each of you. If you're Army, civilian, military, and you have some great ideas you want to bring in front of me, all doors open, right? This is, we don't want to put any filters between you and me. So I'm looking for great ideas. With this, I'm going to turn it over to, we'll start with Dr. Markowitz, who's going to talk about some of the data successes we've had.
Hi, thank you, sir. Dave Markowitz, I'm the Army's Chief Data and Analytics Officer. As Dr. Iyer mentioned, the Army has done a lot of activity over the last few years. It's been embedded in a larger DoD movement. The Secretary-in-Chief identified the need for data as part of our multi-domain operations. It's embedded in the DepSecDev's view of creating data advantage to make data a strategic asset, as Dr. Iyer mentioned. We've been under a Army order for the last 2 years, and we've made incredible progress since we've begun. From everything from linking our Title X activities, from contracting to fiscal activities, to Army Future Command's lead with Project Convergence, providing enabling integration at the tactical level, and been working with our joint partners on JADC2, as well as current operations, where the activities we've done really for the past year in building a data foundation has greatly enabled us with current operations, providing the chairman, the Army providing the chairman, Central Command, needed real-time analytics and real-time visibility that we're not able to do just a few months ago, but because of the work the Army has done at whole, we're able to provide our warfighters. It's through experiences really throughout echelon. I'd like to comment to do that at scale and the speed that the Chief and Secretary want. I'm going to really focus on people, because that's really kind of the key enabler that has made us kind of given this progress. It's certainly industry partnerships, getting a tool set and data visibility, but as much important of getting kind of the tools easy enough to use, is getting data leadership and kind of a culture change that Dr. Iyer alluded to. We've provided, as Dr. Iyer mentioned, the Vantage Toolkit. We have several major data platforms from Gabriel Nimbus, using the OSD platforms at Vana, to give tool sets throughout our Army. We've found out of all the people who use dashboards in the Army, about 5 to 6% become content producers. And to enable the Army to produce at speed, we have to make the tools and data easily available for them, so that if it's in front of a battalion commander, division commander, a Title X leader like the CIO or acquisition leader, they have the tools readily available and can be customized at that point of need. To do that, we need to train the force across all of our MOSs and civilian career programs. So there's a cross-cutting skill set. We'll have, I'm an ORSA by background, we'll have our card-carrying specialists, but to give a kind of a data expertise to enable that digital democracy comes with a citizen analyst. And to enable that citizen analyst with the common tool sets, easily authoritative data, and then digital leadership who can identify what is the authoritative data for the Army, simplify it. We have found that when we simplify the data structure in the Army, we had a 4-fold increase in data analytic products. So it's not just having the right AI tools and other platforms, but knowing what data is easy to use. And then once you make it easy to use, so I'm looking at Doug Matty for all the great work he's done, because he'll simplify some of the data with his AI tools, making that data then available for the broader community, and then it starts to become steamroll, and we'll get, again, at speed and relevance that the Chief and Secretary mentioned before. I only have a few minutes. I'm going to turn it over to my next colleague, Mr. Paul Puckett, our Cloud Office Director.
Thank you, Dave. So good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Puckett. I'm the Director of the Enterprise Cloud Management Agency. Super thankful to be here and thankful for the leaders here. It's becoming more and more apparent, I hope, to everyone here as you peruse the floors that the way that we are going to fight and win and compete in the future, and really, quite frankly, now, is by leading through technology. And far too often, we've seen technology as kind of this side enabler, but really more and more it's becoming this critical capability that becomes just the way that we have to fight and win. And so as part of the cloud, we're really bringing that to bear and creating that technical leadership of the future. And there are really 3 points I want to highlight of capabilities that we are delivering as well as enabling for the United States Army. First, there's a critical need for a globally secure and available, accessible, and resilient cloud infrastructure. When we talk about cloud, far too often people talk about this thing that they can't touch or see if they're in some disconnected environment. But really we need to realize that every single computing and storage resource of the United States Army globally has to become an online on-demand resource that we can leverage at any point in time for our mission. And when we start to get that connected ecosystem enabled by a unified network, we really get this availability of true data and mission at speed of relevance. The second point that I want to highlight is there are some common tools and capabilities that we have to deliver to our soldiers if we're going to truly leverage technology for where technology has solved the problem of scale. Far too often in the United States Army, we look at people, which are an amazing strategic asset, but we solve problems with people that technology has already solved for us. And so how do we start to leverage technology in a way where it's a key enabler for our soldiers, where they're given the common tools of modern software development, they're given the tools of modern data management capabilities so they can actually go and do and learn at the speed that the mission demands today. And finally, the third point that we're clearly enabling is how we organize to iterate. Far too often we attack problems in a serial manner, that things follow some wonderful waterfall way that where we can predict the future, go and acquire it, build it, and then field it. And far too often we find that we're irrelevant when we've done so. And when we have the ability to call on cloud computing on demand in a matter of seconds and test a hypothesis that we have with soldiers in minutes, then every single one of our processes and our organizational structures need to complement that ability to iterate at speed. And so we see the cloud as being foundational for our ability to adapt in real time to just the immense amount of data and learning that we need to have in order to be competitive, if not dominant, when it comes to the digital age. And so that's what we're enabling within the ECMA. If you have any questions for the team, we're here, as well as you can reach us online at army.mil/ECMA. And we're very thankful for the Army Digital Transformation Strategy because it truly codifies this vision of what we've been implementing, but also gives us room to grow and run with our partnerships across the Army and how we collaborate, because the ECMA cannot do it alone, the CIO cannot do it alone. This is a joint fight, not just even across the Army, but across the DoD as well. So with that, I'll pass it over to General Easley to take us around security.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Major General Matt Easley. I'm the Chief Cybersecurity Officer under the Office of CIO, and it's really a pleasure to speak to you this morning. I'll be talking to you about the cybersecurity portion of the digital transformation strategy. As you probably are aware of, the White House put out an executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity in May. And for the services, it had 2 big tasks. One is move to the cloud. You know, we've been moving to the cloud for a while now, and we're continuing to do that. And Mr. Puckett just gave a great introduction of that. But more to the cybersecurity piece is to enable a zero trust framework for the services. And I don't want to jump into the 7 pillars of the NIST framework or the 22 capabilities that the DoD reference architecture tells us that we need for the zero trust framework. But I want to say that we are already well on that journey. For the capabilities that we've been enabling around the Army, through Army Cyber Command, through the G6, through NetCom, is we already have that foundational layer for our zero trust systems. We have our endpoint security, we have our identity solutions, we have activity monitoring, we have cloud isolations, we have our perimeter defenses. All these systems have created that foundational layer for zero trust. And our goal over the next few years is to develop the capabilities to improve that, to really be able to use that technology to increase the way we defend our networks. As you may have realized, the perimeter of our networks has become more and more fuzzy over time. As we allow more cloud-based access, more and different flows into the network, we have dramatically increased the attack surface. We've dramatically increased the number of endpoints we have on the system. I mean, hundreds of thousands of traditional endpoints, and hundreds of thousands of individual users, hundreds of thousands of operational technology devices, and with the Internet of Things, millions more we know are on the way, and we know we have to create the framework to do that. To do that, we know we need data. We've talked about data. We have to have data standards so that data is coming into our systems in a coherent way. We know we have to use the cloud to do it because that's the only way it's going to scale to a million-person organization. And then finally, we need architectural standards to really understand how to bring the network together. Part of our current activities is also really, as you've heard all the prior speakers talk about, is our workforce. We're doing a zero-based review of the Army cyber workforce this year through an NDAA requirement, and we'll continue that as we adapt our workforce to this new reality of our systems. To keep this short, I'm going to turn this over to my former deputy when I was the director of the AI task force, and really proud to turn the mic over to Dr. Doug Matty, the director of our AI center. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. So Dr. Doug Matty, I'm the director of the Army's Artificial Intelligence Integration Center in Pittsburgh, and I'm very pleased to join the team because it is a team effort. What I think you've heard in most of the comments is really an underlying theme that we're developing holistic capabilities. And so while there's a tendency to focus on the material solution or the technical solution, one of the key lines of effort that you'll see in the strategy is our approach to people, training, and especially leadership, because that's really what the Army does, is we produce leaders as one of our key capabilities. And so with our efforts, be it the software factory where we form those teams and allow them to go forward and solve a number of those issues that are potentially easy in the view of some, but actually raise up to the operational or potentially strategic level because of scale. We're looking forward to continuing to do that work and continue that progress. Also with the artificial intelligence center, we have what we call the AI factory, and that's where we'll catch a lot of those folks that we're building with regard to the specialized talent that you heard referenced before. So the key thing that we'd like to highlight is really is the model that we look at is we're trying to build capabilities across the Army for our people. So it starts with the top, with the leadership, right? Informing them through data-driven leadership opportunities and courses. We have the scholars level where we have those professionals that are, no kidding, the world's thought leaders on AI, machine learning, and those advanced techniques, right? But really the center of gravity for us, we believe, is our AI technicians program, and that's where we have folks. We all love to go build the sandcastles, and no one wants to build the sandbox. But we have the AI technicians that will actually work with Mr. Puckett and the other folks here. We'll spin up those instantiations. We'll build those cloud platforms, and we'll allow them not only to build that out and support the engineers that are doing the work, but then also become those master gunners, if you will, and train our AI users. Because as you know, it'll take a broad scope of effort to train those users that understand the difference between, I'll say, our current systems and those that are going to be AI enabled, right? Because there's other implications, not just to be able to use it efficiently, but you also have to think about the ethics, the policy, those other more robust considerations that come with AI enabled capabilities. And so with that, sir, I'd like to just turn it over to you and look forward to having any discussions about our people approach and where we're taking it.
Thank you, sir. I am going to be very, very brief so we can leave a little bit of time for questions. First off, Dr. Iyer, thank you for letting me be a part of this panel and for all the great teamwork and support. It is fantastic to be your wingman. So if the audience takes anything from the last couple days, whether you were at the Warriors Corner yesterday when we talked about the unified network, or you're here today, or even some of the comments by our senior leaders, unity of message and a clear understanding that we're at an inflection point. And so foundational to everything you heard these great gentlemen talk about is this notion of a unified network that allows us to deliver strategic, operational, and tactical effects at the time and place of our maneuver commander's choosing. It enables cloud, it enables AI, it's got security built into it because our adversaries are thinking adversaries. So the vision that Dr. Iyer has laid out is underpinned by this notion of a unified network. And as you've heard several times, we are at an inflection point, and the unified network is not simply a requirement, it's an operational imperative. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, we're ready for questions.
Thank you. My question is for General Easley. And I'm Yasmin Tajday with National Defense Magazine. General, so when you said that the Zero Trust framework, you guys are working on that right now, what's the timeline on getting that completed? I imagine obviously that's sprawling, but I mean, is there a time frame that you could share with us?
Sure. The Zero Trust framework that NIST and the NSA and the Department of Defense have laid out is a framework for improved cybersecurity. So, I mean, part of this year's effort, as laid out by the White House plan, is just to give the White House kind of the first step of that plan and to show them what capabilities that the services are already doing today. I think that journey will last. I mean, cybersecurity will never go away, as you can imagine. So I think that journey is going to be a multi-year, I mean, probably a decade-long effort that's going to take us to really understand how to move those systems, both from our traditional IT systems, which I think are well up in the maturity model of that, to some of our operational technologies that have always been on a standalone network and are still at square one. So, thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Iyer. Ted Cummings with MuleSoft. Looking forward to reading the policy, ADTS. Was wondering if it replaces or subsumes or supersedes any of the aspects of the XORD, of the mandatory implementation of data service requirements memos from the last time, or is it a kind of a continuation and supplement of it?
Yeah, so great questions, right? So last year, one of the policies that we put in place was the data services requirements memo that basically said, hey, any program of record, doesn't matter who you are, you're going to have to expose your data through APIs for interoperability, right? So we put that executive order out and is now policy. What the strategy does is, it takes it out like level higher, right? Because last year we were putting out some policies without an overarching strategy in place. What ADTS does is, it helps us pull all those pieces together. So we have, like I said, a unity of effort and all of these things to kind of work together. Because otherwise, if people just looked at data and data policies in isolation without looking at cloud or cybersecurity, right? Then again, we're sub-optimized. So this is our approach to kind of integrate those aspects.
Good afternoon. Jim Perkins, I'm a major in the Army Reserve. I have a question about the people side of things and to the detail that you can share in this forum. As an Army Reservist, I love supporting technology efforts in the Army. It matches my day job, as you mentioned, to what I get to do. I'm extremely curious about what you can share in this format about what's coming to be available, whether it's, if you think of the paradigm of like CLS training for data, or, whether it's a new functional area, new skill set, new ASI, things like that. You have a large audience of soldiers who are interested, I think.
Yeah, no, thank you. We're developing a digital human capital strategy. We've identified 5 focus areas. The one we've done the most work in is on data, but we're trying to work in like cloud architects, cybersecurity, to identify how many of the skills need to be put across broad MOSs for kind of training, and then which ones may be more kind of core specific. Some of the areas where we've tried to do, again, we're furthest along on the data side, is identify common skills that are hit kind of 90% of the workforce. So kind of basic data manipulation, data analytics, and try to identify which of those are the higher end skill sets. Our next step is then to make sure that is visible across the TRADOC school sets, to make sure that we're enabling them with view. Now, some have already moved forward, like, Love Fort Lee, CASCOM has already incorporated a lot of data analytics. Cyber Center of Excellence has already started to include that as well. But we want to make sure we kind of get a common metric about skills across. We're also interested, as General Easley mentioned, the zero baselining, to make sure our cyber workforce is trained to do the work that they're doing and making sure they match, right? And trying to, as kind of Mr. Puckett said, what can we automate so that we can get people out of normal, highly labor-intensive tasks, and to change that skill set to more of working the tools that automate than previously labor-intensive. But that work is still more ongoing. And as kind of General Easley pointed out, I'm looking at him, if the zero baselining review, right there, oops. Hi, Nami. Will be continuous kind of review. Are we about right? And as we start to transform how we do cybersecurity to make sure those skills are. So this is a journey that is not, I wish I could kind of, by this point we'll be mostly there. I'm not exactly sure when the timeline is as we've kind of done that zero baseline restructuring, automate the way we do the unified network that General Morrison said. The skill set and that transformation will be with us for at least 5 years, if not a decade. My gut sense, it's going to take that amount of time. Help? Yep.
Okay, I'm being told we're out of time. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to stop by. Looking forward to engaging with you. Please don't, make this the last time we have this conversation, because if this is cultural transformation, this includes all of us. It includes all of you. We need your help and support. So if you need help understanding what the strategy says and the role that each of you play, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to help you. And have an awesome Army Day out here.